So let's talk a little bit about the technologies involved here. Does the Higgs boson or concepts such as binary black holes sound familiar to you here? So these discoveries were made by the analysis of huge amount of data that were derived using sensors such as the Large Hadron Collider or radio telescopes around the world. By means of the use of machine learning, these huge amount of data were analyzed and we were able to derive conclusions. Actually, these technologies are evolving really fast. In the beginning of the 90s, we launched the Hubble telescope. It was able to transmit back to Earth over 20 gigabytes of information per week. In 2020, the LLST radio telescope in Chile will start working, and it will be able to transmit over 2 terabytes of data per day. So as we've seen, these technologies have been around us for a while. So how are we doing in healthcare? If we ask a room full of clinicians, the average group of clinicians around the world, whether they are able to tell how many patients were admitted in their department within the last month, how many of those patients survived, and what was the exact dose of a given drug these patients were receiving. Some of them might not get this answer very quickly from their hospital information system. Even after a while, a lot of them wouldn't be able to give you an accurate answer. Now imagine going to the bank, you sit there, and the people there don't know who you are, how much money do you have in your account, or how much money you have requested. So this could be nonsense, right? All this leads us to the question, why are we lagging behind in healthcare? What's the problem? Well, the main problem is data. To facilitate the adoption of machine learning in intensive care, we need to improve initiatives to share and integrate data. In a nutshell, machine learning is the art of teaching machines how to learn with the means of examples. Despite the general belief that machine learning is going to take physician jobs away, what's not true, it will allow them to focus on what they do best, which is taking care of their patients. In the end, the artificial intelligence, decision support tools integrated within a hospital department will allow these clinicians to be freed from the keyboard slavery and actually spend time with their patients. As it was recently published in the book Deep Medicine, the greatest opportunity offered by AI is not reducing errors of workloads or even curing cancer. It is the opportunity to restore the precious connection and trust, the human touch between patients and doctors that existed many decades ago. Eventually, doctors will adopt AI and algorithms as if they were partners. So in the end, it's not going to be a war between AI and clinicians. It's going to be a battle between clinicians and clinicians with AI. We know who is going to win. So we have the data. What are the steps for performing machine learning? At the very first step, as a very first step, we need to get the data. We need to be able to have access to a data source that is easily queryable and where we are able to store valuable information. Only then we will be able to start preparing the data. We need to transform it, we need to clean it, we need to remove artifacts, we need to reshape it. Actually, in this second step, the work of a data scientist is where we spend most of the time, actually. 80% of the time of a data science project is spent on the second step. Only after the data is ready, we will be able to choose a model, to train it, to evaluate it, and then tune the parameters until the performance of the algorithm is satisfactory. Only after having applied all these steps, we'll be able to deploy our decision support tool, our predictive algorithm, and make predictions in our department. So here we are seeing a decision support, decision tree, which is a typical machine learning model. Here, the algorithm is classifying houses in apartment in San Francisco and New York. The data it is using to do so is the size of the apartment, the price per square meter, and the height above sea level. As you see, there are two metrics here. The first one is 100% accurate. This is the training set. This is what we are actually showing the algorithm to learn. But then we keep some of the data, what we call the test training set, so we actually know if the algorithm is able to make predictions with new data, when we provide it with new data. Actually, according to 2012 Institute of Medicine report, only 10 to 20% of clinical decisions are evidence-based in a hospital. So we have a lot of work to do still. So the machine learning objectives that need to be achieved are addressing meaningful questions at a global scale, improve cost effectiveness of healthcare, and finally, the most important thing, bringing value to the patient. So how do we get all this data we need to give better treatment for our patients? The human body is an incredible source of data. Actually, a 3D CT scan can require up to 1 gigabyte of storage to be saved. And a chest X-ray, DICOM image, for example, would take around 30 megabytes. And sequencing our whole DNA will require 3 gigabytes of storage of space per patient. So why do we need so much data? Despite older learning algorithms, new machine learning techniques improve when we give them more data. So the bigger amount the data the algorithm is trained with, the better performance this algorithm will have. What could be the ideal scenario in a hospital? Well, that could be the data loop. We will have a clinician that wants to take care of a given patient, and he's unsure of how to do so. It will connect to the decision support system, and based on all the data we already have from that patient, imagine it has been admitted in the ICU for 24 hours. This decision support system will use all the experience, all the information we already have about other ICU patients, and give recommendations to the clinicians on how to treat this given patient. After this, the clinician will decide what to do. It can do whatever the decision support system says, or follow a different approach. But whatever the physician finally, whatever treatment the physician finally applies to this patient, the database will record it. So next time a patient is admitted, this experience, this data, these new findings we have about every new patient will help us better treat all the patients admitted in the ICU from now on. So that is how we will be closing the data loop. So how are we doing in the US? In terms of digitalization, as you can see, we are doing pretty well. Almost all the hospitals now are not relying on paper-based health records anymore. But there is still a problem, interoperability. If I go, we were talking about banks before. If I go, I live in Boston. If I cross the river and go to Cambridge, to an ATM there with my credit card, I will put it in the ATM, and they will know how much money do I have, who I am, and they will have all this information about me instantly. But if I do the same, just I go to a hospital across the river, they will have no idea who I am. They will know what happened to me before in terms of healthcare problems or even who I am. So as we've seen, there is still a lot to do for improving. So how are machine learning algorithms applied to solve specific problems doing? Well, in the beginning of the 90s, for the first time, this IBM team was able to beat Kasparov, the world chess player, in a chess game. Only a few years ago, the AlphaGo team was able to beat the Go champion. Go is a way more complex game than chess. But no matter how complex these games are, the human body still works with rules we don't really understand. And it will take us still a few decades to crack all the profound mysteries of the human body. So we need patience mainly. So what are we doing exactly in our lab? Well, we are trying to create this data federation. One of the first things we do is celebrating datathons around the world. We bring together clinicians, engineers, data scientists, statisticians into a conference room like this one. In every table there is a team, and during 2 days they need to address clinical questions using the open data repositories this laboratory for computational physiology has been managing for more than a decade now. I think someone was asking about open source data sources of healthcare. Well, we actually have a couple of them. I'll talk about them in a while. So in order to foster open data initiatives and promote the creation of transparent algorithms, our lab is creating a data federation that will help address the reproducibility crisis and improve how predictive models are able to generalize regardless of where the patient being treated is from. In particular here, I'm helping Spanish hospital that want to be part of the data federation, integrating data coming from the ICU. This is a complex matter that needs to normally deal with standardization and legal regulations. So let's talk about specific questions we can answer with this data set. I'm going to describe it in the first slide. So the icons are, the left one is the paper is still being written, where the data is coming from. This is MIT, and the data sources are EICU and Mimic. They are open. So I will, that's how I will show where the data is coming from in every of the projects. So here we are working on validating Severitas, a mortality prediction for critically ill patients in low and middle income countries. Normally in the EHR, we can, when we buy an expensive one, we get a mortality prediction score that tells us how serious our patients are, so we know who to treat, who to focus on, and what to do exactly with this patient, who to prioritize. So in low-income countries, we are able to, just with a couple of variables, such as the worst blood pressure or the worst temperature that was taken from the patient in the first day of ICU admission, we were able to develop a prediction severity score that is able to make predictions almost as accurately as other private and not transparent algorithms that now are available in the market. Another project we work on, as you're going to see, the questions you can answer with the open data sets are really, really different and really, really broad. So we were able to study the obese paradox. Why are obese patients surviving longer in the ICU, even though the illness score is classifying them as more severe? Well, we were able to conclude that these severity of illness scores are not taking into account the BMI of these obese patients. Also, we were able to develop a well-calibrated illness severity score for decision support in the critically ill. This paper was actually accepted in Nature Digital Medicine a couple of days ago, and it is able to make predictions just using machine learning techniques such as random forest or XGBoost. It is able to make more accurate predictions by just analyzing almost all the data points we have available per patient. Then in the anesthesia department at Beth Israel Hospital, we studied how targeting a given blood pressure level is changing the outcome of the patient, how targeting a given blood pressure level using vasopressor is improving the major adverse events that the patient is suffering after the operation. Normally, we analyze here mainly patients that undergo CABG surgeries. By concluding what the critical threshold is, then we are going to study anesthesiology variability, how different providers in the OR are performing, taking into account the critical threshold. Also, using the EICU repository, the initial private version, the available one right now contains information, the identified information of over 200,000 patients. So we studied how racial trends in critical illness, acute kidney injury is performing. So we were able to see that in African Americans in the US is not only worse from the beginning, but it's also not improving. So in this other project, we studied terminal patients. We studied how they are treated differently, how there is no actual guidance right now in terms of guidelines right now in terms of treating them, how different patients are receiving different treatment, different CMO treatment. And in this other project, for example, we are studying how trying to answer given specific clinical questions differs with the data source we are using. So high-resolution databases may lead us to different questions, to different conclusions compared to low-resolution databases such as the National Inpatient Survey. That is a very typical database that has been used so far for addressing a lot of different clinical questions. So we have seen how these technologies can assist clinicians in order to extract knowledge from their patients' data. Improved diagnosis is obviously valuable, but improved treatment is going to benefit so much more from machine learning. Eventually, hospitals in developing countries, for example, could create their own databases too. Researchers unable to afford clinical trials could understand their own patients' population and treat them better, democratizing the creation and validation of new knowledge. So we have been talking about cutting-edge technologies and prestige institutions and revolutionary challenges. But there is something very important still missing. Only when we manage to work as a team, when we understand the importance of breaking down barriers for addressing clinical problems, only then artificial intelligence will achieve its true goal and generate value in order to improve the quality of life of our citizens. Thank you very much.